Okay, so I'll start to talk about the pre-application preparation. So this is something before the actual application season of the academic job market. And yeah, before I get into the details, I want to emphasize again that this is largely based on my personal experience, both as the applicant and sitting on search committee. So I'm sure that faculty here might have different opinions or experience, and your advisor, most importantly, might have their recommendations too. So I would recommend you talk to different people and get the most customized plan for yourself. But overall, the pre-application season, so when I say that, I don't mean that you need to get everything ready before an application season even start, right? So this stage basically means you should be ready in terms of your progress in the program, including, let's see, your research, your publications, fellowship, grants, teaching experience, etc. So this preparation stage should come long before the actual application season. And we could say that the entire grad school is preparing you, right, for this. So basically, overall, for the timeline, I would say you need to map the timeline very early. I'd recommend you get a career plan as early as possible, maybe starting in your first year in grad school, but it's never too late. Okay? So map the timeline and get ready at least, I would say at least 1 year, the summer before your planned graduation. So by saying this, I mean, if you're graduating in summer or spring 2023, you should be ready the previous summer, our previous summer. And if you're graduating in summer 2024, you need to be ready by next summer, by the end of next summer. And here, I mean, you will need to get involved in research projects. This includes both your own research projects and or research projects collaborating with faculty members or other students. Whether you need to be in a collaborative project will largely depend on your topic, field, and method. Right? But you should have your own research project no matter what. And that should start very early. And you need to have a plan for publication. It's not entirely impossible to land on a good job without a publication, but good publication record will boost your opportunity greatly. And publication is a very long process, so you need to start early. Publication could take like I would say up to 2 years. It could well beyond 2 years, right? So if you want to have at least one publication out when you before you get on the job market, you might want to send something out in your 3rd year. Right? That's a pretty long preparation process. And also, you will need to attend conferences and network at conferences. So attending conference is one way to show your membership in the academic community. Okay? And also by networking, you can actually just meet people in your sessions, or you can email people beforehand, right, to schedule some maybe coffee chat and to talk about your research ideas. All of this can help your presence in this community. And also, if you do have some time, if you think you can manage it, you can maybe serve as a student representative at committees in some of the conferences. That could help too. Accumulate teaching experience. So some of you may have to work as TA and RA as part of your package, right? And this is actually a very good thing. You will need to have some teaching experience on your CV. when you are ready for the job market. If you are on a different package or if you, for some reason, did not get TA experience, I would recommend you try to get something, right? It could be a summer teaching position. And in general, I would say teaching as a lecturer, as SA, is better than teaching as TA. Or if you don't have the opportunity to teach as SA or TA, you can ask to give a guest lecture that could help too. And apply for grants and fellowships right, early. Even if you have a full package, you don't need external fellowship, I still recommend applying. Identify potential reference letter writer throughout your grad school years right, to get to know people both at your institution and outside. So these are all the components you need to get prepared before right, the actual application season take years. So start as early as possible. I think that's.
Oh, cool. So we're getting ready for the job market. Then how do we find out about jobs to apply for? Where do we go and get all this information? I wish there was always just kind of an easy repository, but you have to do some hunting, but you can also, I think, automate it in a way that makes your life not so stressful that you're always Googling and always looking up for stuff. And so I think a couple of things that I would recommend that I think are super helpful are going to some primary job sites, whether that's in your kind of subfield for education broadly, or just like for higher education, and signing up for emails. Some of them will be like really way off base. Like you're going to get a lecturer position in a job that you're not interested in, that's in a field that's not even yours, but that's okay because you can always delete that email. You'd rather be like wide and get more emails and filter through those than not. And so two sources that I think are super helpful are higher ed jobs, which is operated by Inside Higher Ed. You can go in and say, I'm looking for a full-time teaching position. I'm looking for a tenure track position. I'm looking for, it needs to be remote. It needs to be in this area of the US. Then you can also filter down into like your discipline or kind of your subfield or what type of role you'd like to be in. And that's operated by Inside Higher Ed jobs. And you can find the same thing. Yeah, I'm happy to share the PowerPoint too. Happy to going to Chronicle of Higher Ed. They have basically a similar search engine. And so you can just sign up for an account and you'll get an email and you can set like the frequency of that. And a lot of it will be redundant. The same jobs will be posted to one or the other. But again, it's better to get the job twice than to not get it at all. And so I think that's okay. Things that are super helpful though, we're going to like your relevant education or disciplinary association. So maybe that's CIAS, maybe it's American Sociological Association, maybe it's like APAM or AERA or something. They also all have job boards or like career centers. And so you can do the same thing, make a profile, get lots of fun emails, and then that's kind of your best way of filtering through and finding out what makes the most sense. If you're in kind of an other disciplinary area, there's also like boards that are focused only on psychology, only on sociology or econ and things like that that can be useful. But we also try to share jobs that we are aware of, that our network makes us aware of, sending those to Kristen, and I think they're posted on my EPS or maybe on like Canvas or something too. And so just check your email. I know that we get a lot of those, but we'll try and forward jobs that we know are aware. But the number one place that I found jobs was on Twitter, was on social media, because people share them. They're like talking about them. I had them like sent to me, or I just like saw them from lurking. And so if you're active on social media, like see if you can set up something, you know, like to find out what jobs are. If you're not on social media, not on Twitter, and you don't want to have a Twitter presence, that's cool. I think you could like sign up and just be like a lurker. Like you don't have to have a profile photo. You don't have to have anything. Just like follow people who are likely to have jobs, or like follow schools and associations that reshare jobs and things like that. And I think that's an easy way of kind of constantly being reminded of where jobs are, when the deadlines are. And sometimes also like the search chairs will do like threads about like, we're looking for this, or like recommendations, or, oh, you need to have letters now versus later or something like that. And so it can provide a lot of other helpful info. And they'll often offer to like meet with you or something like that too. So social media is great. Oh, cool. Cover letter. Sorry, I don't have my computer with me. So cover letter is kind of an important, like you found your job that you want to apply to, you've read about the job, you've read about the department and everything. So now the idea is now, okay, how do you distill who you are and like who you will be into like these 2 pages or like 1 page if it says that or something. And so I think the cover letter is potentially like the most dynamic part of your job application. You may have kind of a standard cover letter, but I think that it is most effective if you find ways to make that cover letter kind of bend and mold to the job of interest so that it's really tailored toward that role and to highlighting your unique qualifications for that role, your unique fit in the department, courses, and things like that too. And so generally, these are like 1 to 2 pages. If there's ever a direction on what it should be, I think you should stick to that. So if it's 1 page, do 1 page. If not, I think it's safe to assume that you can use 2 pages for a cover letter. Put this on departmental letterhead. So on EPS letterhead, you're coming from our EPS PhD program. And so you should have our like logo and contact info and things like that on there. And it will help folks just like recognize where you're coming from and help in all of those things of when they're sifting through. But you want to do a lot of things like in the cover letter, right? And one is kind of introducing yourself and then kind of getting to the meat and potatoes of what should be in the cover letter and then wrapping it. And so in the intro, it should be kind of like very short and sweet, but also like direct, right? So who are you? Where are you getting your PhD or what is your PhD in? Kind of, are you in a current role or current institution? Kind of where are you coming from? Most recent kind of background. If you're set to graduate, you don't already have your PhD in hand. I think a lot of folks would recommend like, I will graduate in May, whatever, or my defense is scheduled for so-and-so. So the committee's like, thanks for applying. Are you going to be able to take this role on? And so just being explicit about, I'm graduating, here's my time. And then highlight what's unique about you, like from a research, like specialty space. What's your area of expertise? What's the one thing that you kind of really want them to know about you at the front end? Got my PhD from here. I specialize in this, like looking for this job. In the body, this is a part that can be like really, these sections can be really molded though, but you need to, I think, touch on your research interests, your research experiences. You need to touch on teaching and service, and this may be a more important part of a role based on what you know about the position or what the call states. Touch on service to students, the department, field at large. And then if there are other things that are important to highlight, either for you as a candidate or for the job specifically, use that as a time to note those as well. So on research, I'd say like the cover letter is your big time to talk about like, who are you as a researcher? What are your big, broad strands of research? What conceptual, methodological contributions have you made to the space, or do you want to make for this space? This is also a time where you don't have to talk about like, I did this project, it involved this data, it got published here, then I did this project. Like, I think about it more holistically and how do your big projects fit together? What types of places are they published in? What types of contributions do they make? Because they have your CV, so they can see all of those like granular details. And so it's a time to, I think about a narrative, but also importantly, right? Like those are things you have done, and you want your cover letter to make your future colleagues excited about who you will be. And so have a nod to the future directions for your work and make that kind of evident in your cover letter. Just as Ron said, when you do teaching and service, like at the university, it's important to highlight those things because those are things you're gonna be expected to do as well. And so, like I said, this could be a big section, it could be a really small paragraph or something, but highlighting courses that you've taught, maybe kind of your pedagogical philosophy, how you go about teaching, or what you see your role in as an instructor for different types of students or different types of institutions. And if you have to, like, if you want a teaching award or you do like a specific type of service or something like that, like absolutely mention those things, right? Like this is, oh yeah, this is your opportunity to like really sell yourself. And it feels weird at times, I think, to say like, oh, I did this really amazing project and my students love me and I got this award and things like that. But this is this is your opportunity to do this because other people do that. But also if you have these things to say, like you deserve to say them and you want to share those things with your colleagues to get excited. And if you have a grant or fellowship, if you got an award, if you did anything that you think is important to talking about who you are as a researcher, as a future faculty member and things like that, then absolutely include it. You can always pull things out or not touch on them in like later statements, which we'll talk about. But I think this is a line for identifying your top line findings or your top line contributions in this area. And then the last, like, don't forget to connect all these things to the job and to like the department itself. And so it's a really good opportunity to show that in the concluding paragraph, like you really did your homework, like, what EPS is, or like what EPS's culture is, or what UW is like the Wisconsin ID and things like that. And so use it as an opportunity to say, like, I'm not only a great person overall as a researcher, as a teacher, but I would be really great in this role for these very specific reasons. And that just kind of sets you up for the next steps that we'll talk about too, like, short interviews and things like that too.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Because I was just talking to some of your colleagues, and I think EPS students sell themselves a little bit short in terms of what their accomplishments are, and take for granted, for example, that students will have, all of you will mostly have done empirical projects as part of your kind of process. And so, but that is a huge accomplishment and something worth calling out. And so just kind of also get in the mindset of understanding that your accomplishments are accomplishments, even though you are among colleagues who are also very accomplished. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like, your recommenders will speak extremely highly of you, and they will talk about all these really great things. And so you don't want it to seem like everyone thinks you're great but yourself, right? And so I think, like, feel free to talk about yourself, talk about your accomplishments, and don't think that anything is too small if it is relevant and important to what you're going to do.
Yeah, I want to mention, especially for some international students, like us in East Asia, we have a culture of being humble. This is not the time. We need to show people what we've done, and yeah, we've earned that, right? To talk about this. Yeah. So I'll talk about CV next. So research statement and CV, sometimes they cover similar stuff, right? But CV sometimes helps to supply additional information. Overall, I would say start building your CV early, not just for the job, right? You should have your CV through, like, when you maybe started your grad school, you should start building it and update your CV regularly. And you can look, for example, for a template. And the example could be junior faculty in your department, right? It could be mine or Taylor's, right? Feel free to check out our CV. And it could be junior faculty at the department you applied to, right? And ideally, you should tailor your CV to the position as well. Different positions may have different focus, right? If you are applying for a research position, you should prioritize the research sections. And if you are applying for a teaching position, of course, you should maybe put your teaching accomplishments at earlier section. So usually, of course, the first block shows the basic stuff, right? Your name, contact information, date, education background. People tend to include their dissertation title and the committee members there too. Professional employment experience, if it's relevant, right? So if you are you are looking for a tenure track position at research universities, we usually prioritize the research part, right? That include your publication, and the publication include published the R&R, those under R&R, and those under review, and you can also list those in preparation, right? Depending on how many pieces you have, right? It's good to show you have something in the pipeline, right? The departments will care about that. It shows your future research agenda and what could you get out within the short time period. And also, the research grants, fellowship funding is another important area. Right? We can put that right below the publication record. And this included the awarded funding and also the awarded but declined funding. Some people Also, I think if you get into a finalist of a grant, you should put it there too. It's already a very big accomplishment. And some people would put their applied but not funded projects there. I'm not very sure about that. I think you can maybe discuss with your advisor further. I kind of not recommend doing that. So then you can put up other awards, honors, and then selected conference presentation. So the conference presentation is actually showing you, again, the community membership, right? So which conference you're going. Let's see, if you're applying for a comparative and international education position, we would want to see you attending CIES. Okay? And for many education positions, people will expect you attending ARA, and there are also the Learning Science Society, right, have their conference. So depending on your field, you should show your membership here. Also, if you have invited talks, right, as guest speaker or as invited guest speaker at any event on campus or off campus, you can list them there. Teaching experience, right? And again, what classes you have taught, in what role, and whether you have won any award. Service to the field, like I said, you might have served as a student representative in some committees, right, or other service in your professional field. And some universities and departments like us, we care about service to the community as well, right? You can put up, if you have your service to a broader community, maybe on campus or in broader context, right? So the CV overall, I would say academic CV tend to be pretty straightforward and plain. I do not recommend using those fancy industry style templates. That's kind of distracting for academic positions. And yeah, again, check out junior faculty's CVs as example, and also adjust your CV to each position.
Cool. So this will be the least fun part about every job search. Every job will have a different requirement for everything. So one will have a 2-page cover letter, one will have a 1-page cover letter, another will ask for a research statement and teaching statement and diversity statement, or like a personal statement, and others will then say, oh, a 2-page one and then a 1-page one. And so this kind of falls into like the all other things that you need to do to get ready for the position. But it's more likely than not that you will apply for a job or a collection of jobs where you will have needed to author a teaching statement, a research statement, and a diversity statement. And there may also be some other things. And so I had to, for one job, I also had to write a personal statement, which was different, and I didn't have any direction on it. I'm not in that job, so maybe it didn't go well. But there are lots of other requirements. And so typically, other than saying a teaching statement or like a research statement, typically the job will let you know if they say diversity statement, like what they're actually looking for in a diversity statement. It's not necessarily like, are you kind of diverse, or do you like fulfill like a certain role in the department, but how do you approach, you know, engagement with diverse populations, or however the institution defines specific groups there. And so, but the opportunity here is that your cover letter is a really short introduction, right, to all of these things, to your research, to your teaching, and to your service. And so this is an opportunity then for you to expand on that, right? And so in the 1-page research, you know, paragraph of your cover letter, you couldn't talk about the really exciting part of the project that was, you know, really neat to you, or that you're going to expand on in the future, or that you're planning to apply for competitive funding for, or something. This is your opportunity to do that. And so think of it like, the committee comes to your CV and they hear about something, they want to learn more about your research or your teaching or your service. Those things should be kind of like a doorway into these statements where they can come and get more information. So hopefully you don't, like, nothing surprising, you know, in these statements that kind of wasn't covered, at least like in the cover letter, and that you didn't leave anything out of the cover letter that you want to cover here. And so, for example, for a teaching statement, it's important to not only talk about like the past courses that you've offered, but maybe also if the job, and they often sometimes do say like, we're looking for someone who could teach blah, blah, and blah. I would list those courses in your like teaching statement that you're excited about doing those, and then maybe also offer a new course that you've been thinking about, you haven't taught yet, or you think would be neat based on your expertise, that you've looked at the curriculum, right, for the job you're applying for, maybe, oh, they're missing something or whatever. And so you could talk about your excitement about developing a new course for the department in there. But it's also an opportunity for you to not just say like, I taught X, Y, or Z. It's to talk about like how you teach and why you teach, and to give the committee kind of a view into your pedagogical process. What role do you see? What role do you take on? And how do you kind of embody that through your assignments, through your teaching, through your mentorship and like approach to students? And so I think about kind of like mechanically, like, what have you done and how did you do it? And maybe like, what do you want to do in the future? And so mine was probably like half and half, I think, about like, these are courses I've taught, but then otherwise, like, what do I see as my role as an instructor, and how do I go about improving myself like as an instructor, and maybe what I want to do in the future. If you say something, I think this is critical for teaching statements, and people may disagree with me, but if you say something like, I make my classroom like an open and like welcoming environment, I would love for there to be a sentence or two after that as an example of how you do that. Because otherwise it's kind of like, oh, cool, like I agree, like everyone does that, but it really brings to life your statement for the committee when you can say, oh, I not only like allow students to take up space and time like in course to do something, but we're like adopt like critical perspectives, we read from very diverse audience, like multiple things like that, I think. But like just have examples for how you do stuff when you say that you do it. And these longer statements are times for you to do that. And then if you have reviews, right? So like if you're planning to teach a course, like, and maybe you're not going to get like a summative like evaluation like at the end. One course at a Penn, like I didn't get when I would TA courses. So when I taught courses, I would get like the formal evaluations. But when I would TA courses, I wouldn't get evaluations. And so if you want to talk to your instructor and see if like maybe you'd be able to give the class like a 5-question survey, like at the middle and the end or something, just kind of build yourself like an evaluation pipeline so you get something like a score for that or something. But otherwise, talk about how great your evaluations have been too, at the end of the semester when you get those.
I think
yeah.
our TA can choose to
Oh,
whether
cool.
they want evaluation at the end of the semester.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, I would definitely do that because you can always include them or not, but you can't go back and get them if you don't have them in the first place. But I think kind of piloting like an evaluation and thinking about ways that you go about improving your teaching abilities can speak to the committee members about how kind of committed you are as an instructor. For kind of diversity statements or like personal statements, like I said, sometimes you get information on what the committee is really looking for in these statements, but I think there's kind of like 2 things or 3 things to think about. First, about how like you as an individual and like your lived experiences can make contributions to the community at large, as an instructor, as a faculty member, like as a colleague in the community, but also how those experiences inform what you're going to do in that job, which is to do research or to teach. And so think about connections between what your experiences were like, or what like difficulties you overcame, or a great opportunity that you had or something like that, how those are directly connected to your research and service or teaching in ways that other colleagues in the department may not have. I also like some explicitly say like, what is your approach to working with, and they'll just put like diverse populations or something. And so this is open. They mean that, I think, to be like open for interpretation, but I think you need to think about the ways in which you engage with people like across any dimension of difference, like in your job, in your classroom. And that could be anything from like interdisciplinary and like methodological backgrounds to like very plain like dimensions of like race, socioeconomic status, and things like that. Think about how those things like inform you and your work and your approach to being there, but also how you engage others and make it kind of an area of opportunity rather than like an area of concern or like a possibility of like folks disagreeing over things or something. And talk about how these things contribute to the community at large. Like, how does you being there make large contributions, versus someone else, and how can you leverage these for strengths? And the last is on research. And so like I said before, when you talk about those different types of themes in your cover letter, you're not able to go into deep detail onto kind of all of those projects or where you see all those projects going in the future. And so this is an opportunity to expand that narrative, right? So maybe you've said, I'm interested in kind of this broad area and this broad area. Well, then under very explicit headings of those, talk about the projects you've done in those areas, talk about the projects that you want to do in those areas and how they fit together. You can talk about the contributions that they make conceptually, methodologically, like to research or policy and practice. And then you can also say this paper was published in blah, or I want to submit this paper to blah after I finish my dissertation, just so people know that you are thinking about what to do next and what's coming forward. And then, yeah, just expand on your future work. And I think I had to have like 1 and 2 page versions of all of these. And so I'd say maybe write for the 2-page one, and then like you can always like cut back rather than feel like you kind of expand with fluff or something. But I would, yeah, talk to your advisor and see about what might be the best option for you. Yeah.
I have to admit, if I read a diversity statement that dwelled on diversity from academic perspective or disciplinary perspective, I would probably read that as an attempt to avoid a harder statement about engaging folks from traditionally oppressed cultures, national origin, race, class, gender, sexual orientation. Would I don't know, what do you think about that as you're advising folks how to put together a diversity statement?
And before you respond to that, could you both kind of summarize the questions or comments in the room just so that people could better, who are online, can better understand what's being discussed?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. So the question was about crafting a diversity statement, and if someone was authoring a diversity statement or reading a diversity statement, and the dimensions of diversity were only around kind of disciplines and methods and not more around more explicit dimensions of diversity like race, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation. How should we think about writing that statement or reading that statement? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean,
you would find little depth in a statement that only talked about disciplines and methodology versus one that was more holistic. And I think that's exactly right. Like I would think about talking explicitly about these different dimensions of diversity. And you may be able to get some support from from the school itself to think about what's on the minds maybe of like the committee members. And so like going here to like the School of Ed, OEDI like office and finding out what their priorities are and things like that too could be explicit. But I think, yeah, like I wouldn't write a diversity statement and not talk about issues of like race or socioeconomic status and other things that are important to the community, but also like your research program and teaching. And so for me, for example, I had previously mostly taught like quant methods courses. And so at times like those are offered to feel as very like objective things, like they're very sterile and things like that. But in my diversity statements, I talked about engaging students of color and women specifically, because in the discipline of like economics and statistics, they're traditionally very hostile to people of color and to women in like very introductory programs. And so my job teaching that was to eliminate those barriers and like increase equity like in the pipeline. And so it was less, I think, more about me as a white man like teaching those courses and more about my role as an instructor and engaging like population. So I think have been kind of underserved in that way. But it doesn't mean I don't need to reflect on like how I fit into the department and across these differences. But I think you're exactly right. I think you need to think holistically and critically about who you are, who the department is, and how these different dimensions of your lived experience kind of like can inform your teaching and service. Yeah. I'm also happy to share mine too, if like you'd like to take a look. Yeah.
I have a question. So how, when you are applying to a job that requires the CV and all of these statements, and I know that the goal is to expand on the cover letter for these statements, but how does the requirement for these statements change the way you write the cover letter?
That's a good question. So I would just say if a position like didn't ask for a teaching statement, I think that I would probably, I don't know. I think there's a couple ways to think about it. If it's a teaching position, then absolutely like include that. But I feel like I tried to feel out the priorities for the job or the committee as I was reading. And so if there wasn't going to be a teaching statement, then I might actually have like slightly lengthened my teaching section in my cover letter because I wanted them to know I taught X, Y, Z, I got this award and I did something there because they're not going to read it anywhere else. Otherwise, I may have shortened it and then said, oh, like as discussed in my teaching statement, like this is a critical like principle for me. It's like it helped me with like in professional development and things like that. And so I think you have to think about like you're making kind of a gamble, right? And so like you have these like restrictions on what you can put forward in these different areas. And so if you don't have the opportunity to talk about your research or teaching or diversity in additional statements, then I think prioritizing those things like in your cover letter makes a lot more sense. It may impact the depth of what you can say though, right? Because you only have so much space. And so you need to kind of hit on things, but I think it's better to talk about something and let the committee know about it because then they'll hopefully want to learn more about it in kind of like a short interview or something.
Okay. And also kind of what some of it look like. So like if all of it is required, what is then your cover letter? Do you use that to like as like a overview of what is to come in the other statement? So like I'm just trying to figure out how to not be repetitive.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
everything is required,
Yeah.
then like in a cover letter, how do you like manufacture that part?
Yeah. So for me, I think the way that it worked was it almost felt like I took my cover letter and I would take like a sentence, like I study issues in this way, blah, blah, blah. And I would like put it in my research statement. And then there was then an opportunity for me to talk about the 3 different projects or something that fit under that. Or I teach blah, blah, blah. Like I think thinking about it in that way. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be repetitive, but they need to be aligned. Like they don't need to see or hear about like a completely different person, in your research statement than they have in the cover letter. My alignment like may not have been great. I'm happy to share like my stuff with anybody who like wants to take a look at it. But I think too, like it's hard to do, right? And I think like I don't know if we were talking about this, but like getting people to look at it and read it and provide feedback. Like I feel like my cover letter or my statements, like they changed multiple times from people, and everyone will have like a slightly different opinion too. But eventually you get to this area where it seems like okay and it makes sense. But I think thinking about like putting your hard-hitting stuff like in the cover letter and then making your other statements like supplementary in that way.
If I can add, we learn Ron's materials for Appleable. So they're really well positioned to give this feedback, but also just from being on a committee. I wouldn't expect that committee members will read every other document as carefully as the cover letter, and even the cover letter will be read because they're getting so many. So it's fine to be repetitive across them. You don't use the exact same language, but it's okay. And then you're probably going to talk more depth in the statement than you will in the cover letter. And it's nice if it's consistent. Like that's the real person then, right? Versus what you think that people want to hear. So
Yeah.
And I think many positions don't explicitly ask for research statements. Your cover letter is actually your research statement plus a bit something else. I think we have some more things to cover. Talk a bit faster, but you will be asked for a writing sample, and I know this is stressful. We don't want to show people what we're writing, and people want to be perfect, but yeah, just your writing sample is very likely not perfect. In the most ideal situation, I would say a single author, a recent, complete, published paper is the best option, or at least already in the pipeline, right, are under review, and it should be a complete research paper. But this is the most ideal situation. If you really don't have that, people do submit a chapter of their dissertation, and it should be twisted a little bit because a chapter of your dissertation will be out of context, right? You will need to twist it a little bit to make people easier to understand it. And if it's a chapter, it shouldn't be a literature review chapter, right? I would say ideally it should be something on a review, or you are preparing it to submit. And I do not recommend submitting co-authored piece as writing sample, especially if there is only one required writing sample. I would highly recommend a sole authored piece. But if you have to submit a co-authored writing sample, I would recommend you add a note upfront, writing clearly your contribution to this piece. Or it's very difficult for the committee member to evaluate your writing when you submit a co-authored piece. And again, it should fit the position requirement, right? If they're looking for an ethnographer, it should be ethnography writing sample. And it should, I would say ideally, it should reflect both your theoretical approach and the methodological approach. This means it's ideally, I would say, an empirical research piece instead of literature review or method notes, stuff like that. Some position might ask for two. In that case, obviously one sole-authored and the other one could be co-authored. This is fine, but you should plan ahead. You should prepare two, right? In that case, yeah. Also, talk to your advisor carefully to pick your writing sample. And we also need recommendation letters, right? So you need to strategize your letter writer. Usually by default, your main advisor, your chair, should write a letter for you, right? If that does not happen, some people will see it as a red flag, right? So your chair should write letter for you, and the most common case, your committee members will be a letter writer, but you could ask someone else depending on the position, right? I think you should explicitly ask for a letter of strong recommendation. We've seen people writing recommendation letters that are not strong, and that will hurt you. I think it works better when you maybe schedule a face-to-face meeting with your letter writer to talk to them and ask explicitly for a strong recommendation. Help to make it easy for your letter writers, because we do write a lot of letters. So ask as early as possible, maybe 2 months before, right? Or maybe throughout your interaction with them, you can hint early that I might ask you to write letter for me in the next application season, right? Provide very detailed information of each position you're applying to. And also you should be responsible for this. You should get things organized. Use a spreadsheet or Excel or any tool you feel comfortable, but get it organized. Rank it by like the deadlines and put the websites there and the exact position, description, and what you expect to be put in the letter, and send a reminder. So the system will send reminder to your letter writer, but if you notice several days before the deadline, you can also send personal reminders, right? List the upcoming deadlines. So get things organized. And your letter writer could, so they could write on different of your strengths, right? If a position is specifically about method, you might want someone to talk about your method in depth, right? Or you could have someone maybe write about how you are very good at as a member of a large grant team and push things through. Okay? So your letter writer could focus on different aspects of your strengths.
So yay, you got a short interview with the committee. You made it like through the first funnel thing. Now your anxiety goes up, maybe down like a little bit, hopefully. But an idea now, or like an opportunity now, is for you to talk about what you wrote kind of in person or over Zoom, like with the committee members. And this is a time where they've narrowed like the applicant pool to like, I don't know, like 15, 20, like 30 people or something like that. And now they want to learn more about you. And so this most commonly, I think now definitely takes place on Zoom, but these are very short, like 15 minutes to 30 minutes or something, like with the members of the search committee. And so I can't like emphasize enough, like, I think that you need to like prepare like for these short interviews. So I basically, when I got one of these, I would do like as much research as I could on the job and the department. So I knew something about every single person who was going to be on the interview. Like kind of what their research was, what courses they taught, maybe like an interesting fact about them. But I also knew about the school at large, maybe one or two cool programs that made sense, or like a new academic, initiative or something, and the department specifically, like different strands of the department, different people in the department, different focuses of the department. And I just like wrote it down in a Word document. So like kind of like a cheat sheet for me. So like as soon as I knew I was like going into this interview, like I knew these are the people, this is the job, these are the places. You also like should organize your thoughts in advance. Like don't go in blind, like, oh, maybe they're gonna ask me this, or maybe they're gonna ask me this or something. You may get questions in advance from the committee. So they may say like, oh, we're gonna ask like these 4 general areas. And so what I did was like, I just answered them on my own, like in bulleted form. Your anxiety is going to be like very high during these times. And so it's so good to like have something to kind of like refer back to. Like when they ask about my research, I want to say X, Y, and Z. Very concise, very like contained, but you want to continue that narrative about like from your cover letter and from your research statement or something into this like short interview. And so I would literally have like research, 3 bullets under it of like things I definitely wanted to hit on, or like teaching, 3 bullets of things that I definitely wanted to hit on. And for sure, I had it on the side of my screen, like while Zoom was going on the other side. And when they asked something, I could just scroll over and like I knew like I was not reading from it, but I knew like in this time I could refer back to it. It was like a strong foundation to me. I could say, oh, good. If I get worried or if we go off on a tangent, I want to come back to this point or this point or something.
Just a question from the chat. Do you ask for information about who the search committee members were before the short interview, so you can learn about them beforehand?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's something that we didn't put into slides. I think that people like vary in this a lot, but I found it very helpful to reach out to the search committee chair or whoever is like published as the contact and ask for like a 15-minute meeting with them or something, with the opportunity of learning like more about the job. And so you should have some like very broad like questions about it, like how does this job fit into the future of the department, or like what role are you looking to fill, like methodologically or disciplinarily or something like that. And that is ultimately also like that insight or that intel that I garnered is like what I would then like leverage to make sure that I was addressing those points, or I knew they were looking for this type of person. And so I would truthfully like be that, like talk about how I could like fit in that in like important ways. And so generally, at least like the committee members there, if you get a Zoom link, like you may get a calendar invitation. That happened to me one time. So I just like saw their names. And so I did a lot of Googling there. I don't know. I don't know if places are like willing to share like the names of people, but if you don't have that, like, don't worry. Like, you don't need to know everything about everybody. Like, surely you know like who somebody on the committee is or something, and like that's totally enough. Like, this is probably like sometimes like overkill, but doing as much research with the information that's been provided to you as available, I think is like important. If you don't get questions in advance, though, I think you need to be prepared to talk about some very specific things and have some bullets under those. The first is like your research. Tell us about your research, like now and in the future, where is it going? And that's a very broad question, but you need a 1 to 2 minute, like very concise answer, like honing in on that. Tell us about courses you've taught, or what courses you'd be interested in teaching, or how might you design a new course on ethnography and education or something. Okay, so think about teaching, think about diversity. How have you worked with diverse populations? What contributions could you make to campus diversity and climate, things like that. And then talk about your fit in the department. You definitely need to know about where you're applying for a job. So I think this is an opportunity for you to show off, oh, I know that you have a social sciences and education concentration, but you're missing someone with this perspective. And so I'm really excited about being able to contribute to that, grow the program, like blah, blah, blah. There's also going to be time, it may only be time for you to ask one question, but there will be opportunities for you to ask some questions. And so have like 1 or 2 thoughtful questions generated that you can then post to the committee. Not about like, what is the job or something. Like, I use this as an opportunity to show that I had done my background research. And so I know there's this new program, or you have a course in this, like kind of questions that like suggest things in that way. Be professional, wear your clothes that make you feel comfortable, but also professorial or whatever. Be clear, but also be like concise. You don't want to run over. You don't want the committee to run out of time to ask you questions. or to give you questions, and then follow up with an email. Theoretically, during these interviews, people say stuff like, oh yeah, I'm teaching this course, blah, 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 and I would really like so-and-so, yeah. When you send a follow-up email, like, thanks for your time, this was great. It was really great to hear about your course on this, whatever, like, I'd love to learn more, something like that. Just try and like find little nuggets that you can personalize it in a way to build connections with people. So, yeah.
One.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. What did you notice? You mentioned like you noticed like a gap in their curriculum, something that they don't have. I mean, that could be perceived as really critical in an interview. Like, how would you approach like approaching critical information in an interview context? You just go ahead and say it. Is that appreciated or?
Yeah, I think it's just all in how you frame it. Like,
Okay.
this curriculum is very robust, it's methodological, conceptual contributions or whatever, like something that I would be excited to contribute to is a course in blah, blah, blah. It could provide additional perspectives and skills and things like that. So I think like very subtly, and do not like, I would not like criticize like the curriculum or something, but just flip it around and be like, this would be a great opportunity, how exciting I could do or something like that. Yeah.
I wanted to add one very small thing is when during the Zoom interview, you can practice with your own Zoom before get to know where the camera is, where your eye should be. And even if you are reading, don't look like you are reading. Interaction is still important during Zoom interviews.
Yeah. I think we need to have like everything else. Stuff will come. We can't cover it all in like 1 hour, but you'll get invited to campus, you'll give a job talk, which is critically important. You'll meet with students, you'll meet with faculty, you'll go to dinner or maybe breakfast with people. Then you'll get like a really exciting phone call and you have to like negotiate, like what's it going to take and things like that. And so those are fun times that your advisor, other people at the institution can be helpful. Ron and I can be helpful as well. But right now, for today's talk, we just wanted to focus on getting there, getting into the process, and then all of the exciting things we can talk about that too afterwards. Yeah, is that everything?
I think, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we took longer than we expected.
Yeah,
We don't
sorry.
have time.
Good questions though. We did
Yeah.
questions iteratively. Yeah, that's
Yeah. We maybe have 3 minutes.
Please feel free to ask any questions, anyone who's in the room or virtual, post them in the chat and I will read them out.
Yeah.
I noticed that you two capitalized dinner.
Because it's scary.
I mean, it is scary. That's why I mentioned it. Like that scares me. Obviously, you can't give a whole presentation on this. Is there like one piece of advice you would give for dinner?
I see, like act as a normal, real person. Talk to people like they are a real person, right? You are no longer presenting, you're no longer giving their job talk, and try to get connected to people at some personal level, right? Talk about the city, talk about your hobby, that can work. Yeah,
I think like the stakes are very elevated in all of this process, right? So like everything is an interview. Like when you get picked up at the airport, when you check into like the front desk and you meet with like the coordinator or something like that, like those people are critically important and they're going to be your colleagues too. And so it's thinking about like being kind and like being a human is important. And I think the dinner too is a time for your colleagues to not only like, you'll talk about the job, but also talk about like maybe where like what they do there for fun, or like what it's like to be part of the community or something. And so it's a time to like let them see who you are as a person, because they're also making a decision on someone who could be there for the rest of the time that they're there too. And so they want to get to know you as a person, not only as kind of like a researcher, in work, like in the hallway type thing. And so it's okay to share information that you're comfortable sharing, like in that setting, and not feel like it's always a test or something. Like you also use it as an opportunity to get to know them. Like, are these people that I want to be around, that I want to, people to vote on me or something like that too, or whatever. And so use it as a kind of a reciprocal opportunity for learning too.
I have a question from the chat that's asked, what about trade-offs between finishing early with little publications versus taking your time and publish and finish with an extra year or so?
I think the convention in academia is that you don't graduate until you get a job offer. It's a very common, right? This is very common.
I don't know. I think it varies like department to department.
Okay,
Yeah. I think people that I talk to, again, my like N1 experience, it's okay. I think that it's okay to softly like go on the market like
Okay.
early. Like I think you can be very selective about the jobs that are a perfect fit for you, that you really love to have that job. And it's an opportunity to like build those materials and things. To build those materials, someone agrees with you, opportunity to like build those materials. And it's like, oh, like I had a friend who went on the market. He didn't plan to graduate but for another year, but he was like, oh, these two jobs are perfect for me. And so he got all those materials together and he ended up getting one of the jobs. And so he like went and got a job, he didn't delay, like, and things like that. And so I think it's okay to like, if you have the opportunity to stay and keep publishing and keep doing work, like that's a really nice luxury and like insurance that a lot of people like don't have. So if you think you're ready and you could go up early, like go ahead and test out the waters and then do it again. Thanks, Erica.
Aren't any other questions in the chat? It is 1:01, but I also want to do one final call. Is there anyone with any questions that they really need to ask before we close up this event? If not, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Odle and Dr. Lee.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for joining us online.
Yeah.